and loving, and they still are. They're doing great. They live in Seattle near my sister. Everybody's awesome. I had a really loving family, tons of cousins, tons of aunts and uncles, particularly my father's older brother Jack and his wife Elaine. Elaine is my godmother. Had a farm in Indiana for about 50 miles, or about 50 minutes from the suburban western side of Cincinnati, where everybody had grown up. My dad, my grandparents, everybody was from that western side of Cincinnati. But Uncle Jack moved and bought a farm in Indiana and kind of broke away to this fairy tale farm and raised 5 kids, and those were my cousins who I had the most incredible adventures on that farm. Just hiking. It was the movie Stand By Me. That was what it was like on that farm every day. We had guns. We hunted. We hiked the railroad tracks. We spent so many nights sleeping by creeks and under the stars, and we raised tobacco for many years on that farm. And like when I was 12, I was chewing tobacco. And then my uncle switched the whole crop to Christmas trees when tobacco came out, how bad tobacco was. So then I spent another, through college, I was working at that Christmas tree farm every summer and winter. So that was Cincinnati. And then at the same time, I was had a lot of suburban experiences, a lot of high school parties where everybody walks in with a 12-pack, it's the only way you meet girls or anything, which I hated all that. But most of my fondest youth thoughts are always on that farm. So,
did you hated parties, or you hated trying to meet girls?
That's a good question. That's very linked. Parties, people are, I remember hating the way everybody behaved at parties, even myself. It's like, I remember. High school parties are can be traumatic. And I don't mean that there were no actual traumas, but just the strangeness of and young people getting way too drunk too early and they're toxic. I generally, I think high school can be really toxic for all. I sympathize with every kid in high school. But mine wasn't even that bad. But I don't want to go back to that.
Were you always the sensible guy then?
Yeah, I think kinda. Yeah, prom was at my parents' house, and they collected everybody's keys so that everybody slept over, right? So nobody drove home drunk from the Berningers' house. The Berningers' house was kind of the safe place where they knew that they could, if they behaved well, that my parents respected me like an adult from when I was a little kid, and I kind of, I was. Yeah. I've learned how to push the boundaries of responsible, but I am kind of I think I'm a responsible person, yeah.
And you did advertising after university, right?
I did graphic design at the University of Cincinnati, a program called DAAP, D-A-A-P, where I met Scott and Mike Brewer and Casey Reese and everybody, and that was like a 5-year design program, and our Nancy started towards the end of that. We played one gig, which we rented out ourselves, a Greek restaurant called the Corinthian, and we made about 100 songs over that 2 or 3 year period, or 4, and they all moved to New York. So Nancy was gestating in New York while we were all kind of finding our professional lives there, and but then Mike moved out of New York, and Casey, our drummer, went to MIT for graduate school, and he's now a professor at UCLA, and so Nancy dissolved. But it was like I was a graphic designer in New York City, and I did that for about 10 years, and I started as a junior designer and became an art director and became a creative director, and ended up managing a whole group of designers. And so I did that for 10 years. I had clients like really cool ones like Metropolitan Museum of Art, then Viagra, MasterCard, a Pequot Native American Museum, all kinds of interesting stuff. Equinox was my least favorite client of all time.
Was the whole of that time, was your dream to be in a rock band?
I think so. I think I wanted to be an artist. As a kid, I imagined having a loft, in New York City, and painting, and being one of those guys, like Basquiat or Warhol, and that is what I was kind of. But then also I was obsessed with graphic design and like Paul Rand, not to be confused with Rand Paul. Paul Rand is sort of the American Bob Dylan of graphic designers, and IBM logo, that kind of stuff. So I was kind of obsessed with designers, and I thought of many graphic designers as rock stars, kind of. And then I started doing that, and I was doing that as a professional, and I was painting in a loft in Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn, and going to a day job where I had, day client. I was living the dream. I had, over the course of 10 years, and doing that, I had about 10 girlfriends too. It's like I was really having a great time in New York, but somewhere in there, because I had this loft out in Brooklyn, and I had heard that there was a band from the U.S. called the Grifters that had once practiced in this loft, and so it already had the DNA of music, being made in this place. Places where music's made hold that. They become these like this place. It's a church, and so I felt really. And so I was like, Scott, I was like, we should start to do stuff again. And my roommate Jeff and I were doing stuff, and Mike Brewer from Nancy was still around. He was recording stuff, but Scott invited his brother Brian to come over to play drums because Casey went off to MIT, and then I think either the first time or the second time Brian came over, he brought Aaron, and we started with had a little 4-track, and we just started writing. Collecting ideas, and that was in '99, I think. So that was like 4 years after I had moved to New York. I moved to New York for good in '96 when I graduated from college. But there it all is. Where are we in the timeline?
Well remembered. When did you start seriously writing songs that turned into songs for the National?
Right around then. In fact, I had a lot of, I had been doing a lot of writing in that whole, graduating from UC, 96 to 99. Mike was still around. I had been writing a lot of songs during that time, that it was clear that they weren't going to be Nancy songs after a while, because Nancy wasn't going to be able to continue. But there were a lot of early National lyrics on those super old Nancy demos and stuff, and so I was writing. So by the time Aaron and Brian and joined, Bryce kind of came in a little bit later in the whole arc, but I did have tons of notebooks and stuff. So we were diving in and recording. Just kind of loose ideas right away, and then the first national record, the first two were us just really trying to figure out what it sounds like when we make things together. Anytime I've collaborated with anybody, I've learned it's an entirely different. It just has a whole different feeling, and it takes time for the chemicals to start to react well with each other, and honestly, I really love our first two records. I do, but when I listen to them now, it's like, yeah, those are our worst records, I think. But I thank God, that's exactly the arc I want.
How confident a writer were you then?
Pretty confident, actually. I had been studying. Tom Waits, Leonard Cohen, and Nick Cave, and Morrissey, and Michael Stipe, and Patti Smith, and Joni Mitchell, I knew all the different ways a song could go, and Robert Pollard and Stephen Malkmus, these are all writers that I knew were people I wanted to write like, but all of them write differently than each other. But I knew I could tell when I had something good, you know, when I had a good lyric. So I mean, not all of it was good. I mean, a lot of the Nancy stuff is particularly bad writing. But it's fun. I'm proud of that stuff now. But I got better slowly. And then when I met my wife Corinne Besser about 20 years ago. Whenever Boxer came out, or shortly before that, she really made me try harder, and I kind of ran everything past her, you know. And if she kind of wasn't crazy about something, I would lose it, and so Boxer took a long time, I think, because I was really trying to impress her, and yeah.
What is a good lyric?
I think a good lyric is one. I mean, there's so many different types of good lyrics. You know, it's like I think a good song has to have a certain amount of genuine, of earnest, heart on your sleeve sincerity. A certain amount. It's got to have a lot of blurry stuff that you're just like, you don't want to connect all the dots, because then it's, you know, and it has to be about 10% stupid. I mean, silly, you know, like have something dumb, a dumb line, or a dumb instrument. This record has some things that I like because they're kind of silly. There's some sound effects, you know. There's bullfrogs and there's a Jeep sound effect, I think everything has to be reckless, you know. Feel like it's a little reckless, and so many people do it in different ways. Adrian Lenker is a writer right now that I just dazzles me. So many, you know. I could just go down a list of a million, but they all write differently. But so,
was there a time, let me say, when you gave up graphic design? Was there ever a time when you thought that you'd made a reckless decision to pursue the band full time?
No, because I could always I can still go back to that, you know, and I did. I mean, Aaron, funny enough, Aaron worked at a competing firm a few blocks down down on Lafayette called Funny Garbage, and we would often, Aaron and I would be competing for the same client during the day, and high pressure. You know, it was all about, by this point, it was before the bubble burst. It was like everybody was desperate for clients, because else they're going to have to lay people off. And Aaron and I would be competing for the same client of the day, and then we'd get together and have to have band practice that night, and then see who won the client. The next day we'd find out who won the account, whoever. It was so funny. So Aaron and I were competing way before we were in a band together. We were competing for Equinox accounts, not memberships. Anyway, but so. What were we talking about? I can't remember.
Whether it was the right decision to give that up.
Oh yeah, so we would, and when the Nationals started, you know, we made a record. I put the first record on my credit card. We put it out, and we were just doing shows like crazy, and we were even going to Europe. We would call in. This was before we had quit, and we would say that you know, we were taking a little, you know, we're sick, and you know, because Aaron would say he was sick. I would just say I'm taking a week sabbatical. He for some reason, I don't know why he didn't say that, but we would be in Europe. We'd be here in the UK and doing these shows, or in France. We did a lot of little tours in France and tiny little places. We played at so many funny little places, but we had our day jobs at the same time. And then even in between tours, I would go back and do work for clients and freelance and for different companies. Scient, Viant, all these crazy companies.
Was Boxer life-changing for you?
Was what?
Boxer as an album.
Boxer. It was life-changing for me in terms of, it's the first record that I felt it worked all, like, it felt novelistic, you know, in a way. It was like, oh, that's holding some kind of magical narrative, and it works, and I'm not sure what everything is happening there, but it did feel right for me, and I remember it took a long time to get there, but I felt really confident about Boxer even way before we were finished, and I think it's because Corinne was like, no, these songs are good, and I just, if I had her telling me these songs were good, I think I had all the more confidence than anybody in the process of making that. I think that's maybe why I was difficult in the making of that too. And Aaron, Aaron, and that's where Aaron and I and the whole band, we really probably had some of our, most intense creative collisions. We've always had. We continue to. Those creative collisions are really healthy, and so, Boxer. It's named Boxer a little bit because of that too. Is that it was a fight for all of us to make it, not just between us. Because we were all on the same. We were all fighting the same beast, which is avoiding a bad record.
Are you a natural frontman, would you say?
My what? Sorry.
A natural frontman.
I've become one, but no, not. I've become. Well, I don't know if I am natural, but I've become much better at it. I think I'm good at it now. But then I see early footage of me, and I was terrified, and I still shake, and with nerves all the time, and but I used to just stand there like a fence post with a cigarette and microphone and everything, just right there, and just keep drinking, keep smoking, keep trying to remember the lyrics, and try not to open your eyes, and then really slowly I started to open my eyes and started to let go of the mic stand, and now I have lyric monitors down on the floor, which I don't read, but they're there. Tonight I'll be reading because I haven't learned the record yet. But having lyrics in front of me genuinely freed me to be a good performer, just because it's a safety net, and I'm not constantly in my head like, what's the next line? Oh shit, what's the next line? What's the next song after this? Do I remember that? We haven't done that in 5 years. Fuck, what's the first note? Where do I start? I don't have to think about, I still have to think about the note problem. That's still an issue. But the fact that the lyrics are just there makes me actually see them and take them in. When I do have to look at them and I take them in, I'm like, hey, this is good. I enjoy my own lyrics. With the fact that I don't have to, keep them in the watermelon, forever is really healthy for me, honestly. I have a very porous melon.
When you are comfortable on stage, how do you feel at the height of a performance?
There's like these, having the, 75% of the time you're really trying, you're working, you're trying to hit the notes, remember everything. You are in a swim, and you can get really sometimes you can just let go, and just like you're not conscious of what you're doing, you're just doing that, like surfing, but it takes they only, sometimes it's just brief moments where you're aware that you're surfing, and you can open your eyes and you see a kid on their dad's shoulder, you see somebody crying, and then you see your mom, and then you forget where you are, and you're in this, how is this possible? And you're looking at, but then you're like, holy fuck, pay attention, you can only ride that wave and be in that now for short periods of time. But it's so incredible but that's why surfers go out every morning at the crack of dawn, to get those just moments of now, where they're not thinking about anything, they're just there, and it's rare. I think I was just on one.
Do you drive yourself insane?
It's addictive.
Trying to get everything right, does it drive you crazy?
It used to, not anymore. Like I realize that when I get something wrong, or I used to get things so wrong, meaning there were times where I thought I jumped ahead in the set list, and those guys are playing a different song, and in my head, I started singing an entirely different song that doesn't match tempo, key, nothing matches, and they finished their whole song. It was, I don't know what song it was, but I was singing something entirely different the whole time. And at the end, they looked at me and they're like, "What?" And I was like, "What happened?" I was like, "Where were you guys?" I was like, "These guys sounded terrible on that." And we were playing. You were singing the wrong song. Yeah, and I was like, something was wrong. I could tell that. But so, like back then, I used to just be like, that could happen. I'm so removed from. I'm just so self-conscious. But now the lyrics are right there. I know 90% of the song. You know, it's going to be fine, and that's made it. I think that's made it a big difference for me as a performer. And even as a writer, I'm kind of you know, I write faster, looser. But now, you know, sometimes you write fast, sometimes you chip at it like a sculpture. I like to do it both ways.
Why did you want to make the Elvi record, which is a decade old now? It returns.
I think more than that. I think it's the 11th anniversary or something. I made it with Brent because Brent and I were pals, and Phenomena and National had traveled together, and you know, seen the lived in vans, you know, side by side for months at a time. And Brent's a genius, and he's such a very different kind of musician than anybody I'd ever worked with. He's a producer, and he plays every instrument, and has 1,000 ideas, so yeah, the Elvi was just diving in and making a bunch of fun stuff with Brent, and we did some great shows, and we even filmed a show at Troubadour, it was like the first show we ever played, and it was really good. It was just a fun. I wanted to do something very different than the National, and yeah, that was fun. Still is fun.
So there might be more.
Still fun, real.
Your first solo album, that was 2020?
Yes, 5 years ago.
And I think, how you say Serpentine?
Serpentine Prison, or Serpentine.
Okay.
Go ahead. Well, there's in Cincinnati, there's a stairs along the river or wavy like this, called the Serpentine Wall. Uh-huh. I've written about that wall a lot. The riverboats would leave from there, and there was one thing there was a dance night on a riverboat when I was in high school called Currents, and I left around 8 p.m. and didn't come back till 11:30 at night, and they served beer to underage guys like me on the boat, and so you would pick up the boat at the Serpentine Wall. So anyway, Serpentine is also correct.
That's important if you're on the radio.
That's the important information about that record. Yeah.
So now is this the follow-up, or is it simply a new solo album?
No, it's the follow-up for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's different. Serpentine Prison was that started with, I wanted to, I was obsessed with the record Stardust, Willie Nelson's covers record that Booker T. Jones produced and plays all over. And I had met Booker T. Jones because I was on a record of his, and that was crazy because I was in a room with, I think, Questlove and Lauryn Hill, and I think Lou Reed had just walked out when I walked in. And so that was when I met Booker. That was way back, I can't remember. That was like 7 or 8 years, 10 years ago maybe. And so I reached out to Booker about doing a record of covers. And as I started cooking covers, a bunch of covers, I also had these other songs, and I was writing songs with Walter Martin. I was writing songs with Mike Brewer, who I've mentioned many times already, and with Scott, and Hayden Desser, and I can't remember everybody who's on that. But so I brought everybody to Venice, California, and put everybody up in Airbnbs, and Booker was there in town for the whole, I think, 2 weeks, and we made that whole record in a tiny little Venice studio with like erotic driftwood on the walls, and Harry Whitford was coming in, and people in the neighborhood were popping by, and Zach Galifianakis popped by, and it was just a really fun, magical 2-week like song camp with Booker T. Jones, that was a dream. But this record, but Sean O'Brien was engineering and co-producing that record too, and so Sean and I, who's worked on the national records, and I've been working with, I record all my vocals with him, but I do in California. He and I have been starting to write songs, and so after that experience with Serpentine Prison and Booker, Sean and I just started really zeroing in on some songs, and we would get together and like once a week and listen to tons and tons of different stuff, random stuff. Sean will tell you what we were listening to, everything from Tom Petty to Miley Cyrus, and we were just whatever songs we loved, and then after listening to music for about 45 minutes, like he would pick up a guitar and we just start bubbling up fresh ideas, and so we did that for a long time, and in fact some of that was happening right after Serpentine Prison came out, and I was also working with Brent on Elboy stuff. I was working on a lot of projects, but then after when the pandemic and the lockdown happened, I was I was doing TV stuff with Sean and Julia, for that record, all like in masks on and stuff. But we right away started cooking some new songs back then, and 4 of those songs we started cooking back then are on Get Sunk, but then I had to totally change channels and focus on the national. Because I had to. So I dropped everything I was doing, including that batch. It's a long story. Because I went through like a long writer's block and depression, which I've talked about ad nauseum. And but on the other side of all that, I was just doing nothing but the national for the past 3 years, or 3.5, 4 years, and we made 2 albums. And over the course of these past few years, especially the last year and a half, Sean and I have gone back and written a whole bunch of new stuff, which comprise about 6 of the 10 songs on Get Sunk. And then, so this is definitely the follow-up to Serpentine Prison.